This is Chill Bill coming at you live from Catrol, here to introduce another exciting episode of Skylanders Portalcasters, the podcast discussing anything and everything Skylanders. Over to you, Ditto.
Thank you, Chill Bill. And as always, I am joined today by my co-host Inklander for this special Halloween episode where we will be discussing the stories for each Skylanders game and ranking them from best to worst.
Boo! Did I scare you?
You startled me.
Well, happy Halloween, Ditto.
Happy Halloween, Inklander. I hope you're ready for this one.
Oh, yes. What a big topic, and, I think a pretty good one, too, especially since we're just coming off of that 10th anniversary episode from a couple weeks ago. So I feel like this is a great kind of other big topic that we should dive into, and while we've already talked about, our own personal favorite games, and we've kind of factored in the story side of that back in Season 1, we kind of figured that it'd be good to actually, focus in on the story themselves, because our personal rankings of these games are going to be quite different when it's talking specifically just about the story.
Absolutely. So in today's episode, we're going to go in chronological release order of the games, starting with Spyro's Adventure and working our way through Imaginators. We're going to state where on our lists each game ranked, and then after we've had a little bit of discussion on that, we're going to go through and just read off our lists from best to worst. So, Spyro's Adventure. Inklander, where do you have this game, the game that started it all, placed on your list when it comes to the plotline?
So for Spyro's Adventure for me, this is at the bottom of the pile. This has the absolute worst story, I think, of all the Skylanders games, because it's just a collectathon, really. You are hopping from place to place, and there's not really that much story stringing it along other than, oh, you need this thing to add to the core light. Oh, look, you got that? Well, here's the next thing, and so on and so forth. And because of that, it doesn't really feel like it has much of a story. It's pretty much just, all right, you have to defeat chaos and banish the darkness, and the way to do that is to hop around from point A to point B to point C, and so on and so forth. And to me, that's not really much of a story. That's just going and collecting things.
And I also have Spyro's Adventure placed in 6th place at the bottom of the list for similar reasons. There really wasn't much of a plot at all to deal with. This game focused more on world building and lore building, and while that is necessary, and they did a very good job with that, the plot is as simple as Chaos has defeated Eon and destroyed the core of light, and we need these vessels to hold the eternal element sources, and we also need to collect the eternal element sources. And that's the entire plot. Oh wait, the reason behind this is to rebuild the core of light and stop chaos. Technically that is plot, but it's a story that can honestly be told in less than 5 minutes.
Yeah, I wouldn't even give it 5 minutes. We just summed it up within a minute maybe. So it's really quick. You can pretty much just say, Chaos has brought the darkness to Skylands. You need to rebuild the core light to be able to defeat chaos and banish the darkness. That's it. That's the whole plot. It's not really great. You honestly do get a lot more of the background and in the lore when you're talking to the NPCs and when you're finding story scrolls throughout the levels. I really think that has more depth and variety of content than the actual story of Spyro's Adventure itself.
Which brings it back to what I was just saying about this game being more about world building and lore building than it is about the actual plot.
Yeah, and I think maybe, it's a good idea in concept, because this whole idea of, oh, hey, the bad guy's won, he's slowly encroaching on Skylands and is about to take it over, that's a great plot idea. We actually pretty much see that come back in a later game. But for some reason, this one just didn't click. There's just not that much stuff that's grooving with it to be able to make the story go forward and feel as epic as it could have.
Exactly. It was just kind of lacking. Well, it prospered in a lot of other ways. Plotline wasn't one of them, and that's what merits it being placed at the bottom of the list. Now, moving forward into the second game, Skylanders Giants. Inklander, where have you placed this installment on your list?
Well, Giants is the second game, and I have Giants in second place. For me, like, I really like almost the atmosphere, I guess you could say, of Giants. It feels like it's way more composed than Spyro's Adventure, and I really like the almost chase kind of aspect of this. Like, it has a very Indiana Jones kind of feel to this plot. It feels very much like I'd say it kind of has the feeling of Last Crusade. Like, it feels very action-packed, very adventurous. It almost is like a race against the clock, almost. We have the Skylanders that are trying to get to the Iron Fist of Arcus, and we also have Chaos trying to get to the Iron Fist of Arcus, and we have, different strategies, and we have them occasionally, like, bumping paths here and kind of foiling each other's, like, plans throughout the game. And, like, honestly, I really enjoy it. And while we've talked about before how, like, the Archean Congatron's maybe not the most exciting foil for Chaos, like, I still really like the vibe here. Like, it definitely has that kind of action adventure-y kind of movie style to me, and that's one of the reasons why I like Giant's plot so much. Is, well, yeah, it's kind of straightforward, and it is pretty much like a collectathon again, but pretty much like for materials to be able to lead us to this final artifact. It's done in such a way where it feels like high stakes, and it feels very action packed, and I really like Giants because of that.
As for myself, I have Giants placed slightly lower, coming in at third place, which is still in the top half. But that goes to show that there was another game that I thought was slightly better in story than you did. In this case, I liked the story of Giants for the most part. They continued to do the world building thing and the lore building thing, but there was a lot more actual story to it. Going back and telling the story of the time of the Giants and of the Archeans, that added a whole lot to it. And it does kind of have sort of an Indiana Jones vibe to it, like Inklander stated. But I also found some of the storyline to be kind of forgettable. And there are parts where, like, for example, the introduction of Chompy Mage, I'm still not even sure why he was there. Like, there was no real storyline tie-in for that.
That is true. He was just kind of there to be a mini-boss, wasn't he?
Yeah. And so, while the story is good, it still, to me, felt like it could have been better. It was a little bit lacking, and there are still some points where it left me confused as to what's going on. That, and as I said, some points are a little bit forgettable. So, I couldn't place it in second, but I give it a solid third place.
Yeah, and I can get that. Like, I can definitely see where you're coming from there. But yeah, as you mentioned, one of the other reasons why I really like it is we get a lot more background on the Archeans. We get to find out about the first Skylanders here, being the Giants. And it's really cool, honestly. It gives a lot of background to kind of the formation of how the Skylanders came to be in a way, and how it pretty much kind of started as a movement up against the Archeans, and I really enjoy that. And I really kind of wish that maybe we'd gotten a little bit more from the Archeans in future games, because they do really sidestep around that later. We do kind of sort of get to see them come back in Swap Force a little bit, but they're definitely on the back burner as the main focus is on Mount Cloudbreak. But it would have been kind of cool to see a little bit more of that in the future. But as you say, it does a lot of good when it comes to world building. But yeah, I can definitely say that there are a couple places where the story does get a little bit slow, like Rumbletown, where Brock gets introduced. That's maybe not very memorable. I think Brock's kind of memorable because of his over-the-top personality, and same thing with Ermit due to his, obsession with clouds. So I think they actually did pretty good job with characterization in Giants. But yeah, I'd say like that level and that whole sequence, yeah, like that, I can get where you're coming from there.
Now, moving forward into the third installment in the Skylanders series, Skylanders Swap Force. Inklander, where did you place the story for this one?
So I have Skylanders Swap Force in fourth place. And the reason why I have it in fourth place is because I feel like there's a kind of decent story to it, and I'm also looking at this from a character development side mostly. Like, we get to learn a lot about Chaos's background, we get to see his interactions with his mom, and we also do get a little bit more lore with the Skylanders as well. We get introduced to a whole new area of Skylands, and I really kind of feel like it's pretty fun. It doesn't exactly have the same kind of action-adventure chase kind of feel to it as I think Giants does, because really in this game it mostly kind of feels like you're searching for the elementals, and as you haphazardly kind of find them, so does Chaos. Like, it almost kind of has this feel of like, oh, you're bumping into them, which, like, you're not. Like, you are actively going to these places because you know that's where they are, but also at the same time it just kind of feels like, oh, look at this, we conveniently got here right as Chaos's forces were arriving again. And so the plot to me feels a little bit more contrived, and it just doesn't feel as fleshed out. And whereas Giants very much felt like oh, we have to go here to do this, to be able to go do this other thing, to be able to do this thing, which will get us to the Iron Fist of Arcus. Here, it very much falls a little bit more into the tropes of Spyro's Adventure, where it's like, oh, we have to go collect this elemental, and we now have to go collect this one, and this one, and this one. And it started to feel very, like, collection based again, which is why I put it in fourth place. I still think it's good. I think it has a lot of memorable plot moments, but for me, it's definitely not my personal favorite.
As for me, I have placed Skylanders Swap Force in fifth place, just above Spyro's Adventure. Well, I do like the story of Woodburrow and of Mount Cloudbreak, and how it's supposed to erupt and all the magic comes out. It's a really, really good story concept. But as Inklander stated, it is very, very reminiscent of Spyro's Adventure in the collectathon sense, where the requiring the collection of the items to progress and to save the elementals, who are also just another thing we're collecting, it kind of overshadows the potential of what the story of Mount Cloudbreak could have been. And I find it actually quite amusing that you bring up that it does well for character development and characterization when there's only really two memorable characters in this game.
That's very true. Yeah, so that is another thing that I can knock Swap Force for, is I think it does a great job of giving some background to Chaos's mom. I think it could have done way better with it, but like, it does do a decent job with it, and we get to see a lot more, particularly from Chaos due to it, so it does really help develop Chaos as a character a whole lot more. But yeah, other than for pretty much Flynn and Tessa, yeah, the rest of the characters are actually incredibly forgettable. So much so that we don't see most of them ever again, really. So yeah, like, it definitely does struggle when it comes to like all of the rest of the supporting characters, but when it comes to the main kind of villains and the main protagonists, I actually think it does a pretty good job.
So this story had a lot of potential, and I don't think it quite lived up to that. I do believe that all the other games except Spyro's Adventure kind of deserve to be above this, because they just did a little bit more. If they had gone a little more back into their basic concept and developed upon that a little bit more, I would say this story could have easily been in the top 3. But to me, it kind of fell flat.
Yeah, I think also if they'd spent a little bit more time hashing out the background and the lore behind the elementals, and maybe giving the elementals like actual personality, and maybe making them interactable characters, that could have been something.
That definitely would have improved the story a lot.
You do have to give the writer some credit, because this was his first time writing for Skylanders. This was David Rodriguez over on the Vicarious Visions team. So, you know, like, for his first time at the wheel, I don't think it's awful. Like, but it definitely could have been tweaked to be a little bit better in quite a few places, especially when it comes to, I think, the background in particular of the region and of the elementals and the whole volcano replenishing magic throughout Skylands kind of thing. And also Woodburrow. I feel like we could have gotten more background on Woodburrow. Rufus could have also have just been completely written out of the story, and that would have made it a lot better too.
Right. Now, moving on to the fourth installment, Skylanders Trap Team. Inklander, where do you have that placed on your list?
Trap Team for me is in third place. And the reason for this is because this one also feels kind of collect-a-thon-y to me. I think it does way better than Swap Force does, hence it being right above Swap Force for me. And, like, I like the plot. Like, I think the interactions with the Doom Raiders are good, and I think all the Doom Raiders, for the most part, have some pretty good personalities. And I think the way that they challenge chaos and play off of chaos really helps move this plot forward. And I think their motivations are what causes it to not feel as collect-a-thon-y, because otherwise, like, if they had flatter personalities, it would literally just feel like we were going around collecting all of these villains. And so I think adding in a little bit more story helps with that, and adding in more characterization helps with that, but also, like, it still feels like this is missing something to me. Like, it doesn't feel like it's really driving any of the main characters forward. Like, we get all these new characters that I think have a lot of good development, but I feel like the Doom Raiders don't necessarily play off of Chaos and reveal a lot about Chaos as, say, like, Chaos's mom or Glumshanks does. And Glumshanks also kind of takes a back burner in this story as well, which is kind of disappointing. This is the one where he doesn't really feel as important as a character, and so because of that, it feels like, because they're introducing so many new characters, a lot of the characters that we've had for the past couple games get really thrown to the back burner, and that's kind of like a negative for this to me. Like, obviously, if I have it in my top 3, I like it, but I think just there's something that was holding it back, and I think that they had a good idea, and they had a lot of fun ideas going around with that, but I think they were trying to just pack too much into one game, and because of that, I think some things fell off the map that should have been a little bit more in the focus.
Now, as for me, I have placed Trap Team in second place, just above Giants, because I feel that it tells a really, really good story. I loved the story of the Doom Raiders. I loved that they weren't flat personalities. They were full 3D, fleshed out characters. I feel like they could have interacted more with Chaos and kind of played off of him a little bit more. Or, heck, even off of Flynn or any of the other NPCs. But the way this was written definitely makes what would normally be just another collectathon feel not at all like a collectathon. There was an actual story of these villains who were broken out of Cloudcracker prison, and the Skylanders needed to round them up and return them to prison so that, you know, the Skylands don't get terrorized forever. And overall, it was a story that didn't quite live up to the potential that it could have, because, as Inklander pointed out, this story does suffer a little bit from, well, having too many characters. And with the random appearance of Buzz and Mags as well, that didn't exactly help.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. Like, they're just there.
They are. And I feel like the fact that this suffers so much from just too many characters is probably the greatest thing holding it back from reaching that first place line.
Yeah, I think they just were trying to do too much with too little. Like, honestly, if this had been a 2-year game, like if they had done like a Trap Team Part 1 and Trap Team Part 2, and they had a little bit more time with these characters and a little bit more time with the story, I think that actually would have helped it a great deal.
Oh, yes.
Or if they had decided to cut back by probably removing Max and Buzz entirely. Hate saying it, but like they could have cut somewhere, or by, you know, maybe only making the Doom Raiders like earth, air, fire, and water or something. Like they could have done something somewhere to be able to help, I think, with the characterization, because otherwise, like, there's definitely a lot going on with this plot. And you also mentioned the like traps and the Cloudcracker prison thing, and I also kind of am not as big of a fan of that. I think that this is the point in the franchise where we start getting a little bit more contrived explanations for the toy side of the universe. Like the whole, like, the Cloudcracker prison explosion causes, like, the shards of that are now the traps that have been transformed and sent to Earth, and then also apparently this explosion was so powerful it brought back the light and dark elements, and I don't know, it's a little weird. It feels a little, over the top. Like, I feel like light and dark would have been way better introduced in Superchargers, actually, because this whole idea of, like, the Sky Eater, like, punching holes in the sky, that kind of seems like that would be an interesting way to bring in the light and dark elements, much more than just, like, Chaos accidentally using too much TNT. So there, I feel like this is when the backgrounds on, like, the actual, like, fourth wall break lore start slipping. But then again, like, the actual fourth wall breaking towards the end of the plot, where Chaos kind of has this, like, revelation that the Portal Master is the one that's causing the problems, that's actually great, and I think done really well. But the actual beginning part of the fourth wall breaking, I feel like that could have been done a lot better.
And see, for me, the thing that sets this apart and puts it above Giants on the ranking list, for me, is the fact that there isn't a single part of this story that wasn't memorable. I normally would have put these two at a dead tie between Trap Team and Giants, but Giants has bits that are easily forgettable, and to me, Trap Team really didn't.
Like, I can kind of agree with that. I think about the midpoint of the game for me. I think the Trap Team plot starts having issues. Like, I think it starts feeling like it's slowing down a bit, but overall, like, I'm still able to remember the levels, which I can say for the most part with Giants, but because Giants reuse so many assets, a lot of those levels do kind of blend together a bit more. Like, I can remember the story of Giants really well, but the thing is like, if you ask me to remember, like, what particular, like, stuff happened in, like, the Secret Vault of Secrets level, it's like, I can probably tell you roughly the stuff that happened around then, but with Trap Team, I am probably able to tell you a little bit more beat for beat what's happening, even if I feel like the plot struggles a bit in the middle.
As somebody with a background in writing, it feels like at that point, it was a classic case of not quite being sure how you want your characters to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably what happened, personally. I think they got to the point where it's like, alright, well, we've already taken out a couple of the Doom Raiders, but we still have all these other Doom Raiders to go, and we need some sort of something for the protagonist to be doing, but we don't know what, so let's just make up something. So that's kind of what it feels like to me. Eventually, I think by the time we do end up getting to the stuff with Crankcase and, like, Chaos getting kidnapped and being, tossed between Crankcase and Wolfgang, it seems like they get back on track then. But all the stuff kind of, like, after, like, Pepperjack to, like, Crankcase kind of seems like they were struggling a bit, but it's still good. Like, it's not bad, I think, by any means, but it does seem like they have a lull there when it comes to their plot.
That's totally fair. Now, moving on to the fifth installment, Skylanders Superchargers. Inklander, where do you have this one placed?
Superchargers, without a doubt, for me, has the best story. It's great. Like, I pretty much have zero complaints about it. While I can criticize the game a lot for the Force Vehicle gameplay sections, I really, 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 really don't like them, as I've said that multiple times. The story, on the other hand, is a completely different ordeal. It is great. Like, there's so much character development, and it really gives us a lot to go on for all of our characters, all our protagonists, all our antagonists, and it really seems to know what it's doing. Beat for beat, it keeps stringing you along, it has some really memorable moments, and it keeps making you want to play more and more. So it's really fun. I really seriously enjoy it, and like, I really have no complaints. It's good for character development, good for plot, like, you name it, like, it's there. Sadly for me, the gameplay doesn't match the story, but the story's really good.
Now, for me as well, this was easy to place in first place. When we decided that we were going to be ranking the stories for each game, I immediately knew two things. That Superchargers was going to be at the top, and Spyro's Adventure was going to be at the bottom.
Same here.
Those were given facts for me. I didn't even have to think about it. The rest of the list, I had to think about where the placement was going to be. Superchargers was not the case there. Superchargers easily has the best written plot in the series. There was only one or two places where I sat there wondering, how does this fit in exactly? It was well written. It was cohesive. It did everything for character development. We mentioned character development in previous stories. This game took that and just blew it up. The character development in this story is unmatched. And the story itself is actually really, really compelling. From the time you first click on Start Game to the point where you defeat the darkness and credits are actually rolling, the story is just, it has you on the edge of your seat for the majority of it. It's really intense, it's really fast-paced, and you could really tell that the writers had a serious grasp on what they were doing here. They brought back a story element from the very first game, from the worst story in the series, and that being that Chaos has brought the darkness to Skylands, and they took that and they cranked it up to 11. As I said, there were a couple of points where I questioned how does this kind of fit in, but for the most part, it was direct, it was straightforward, it was cohesive. It was honestly the first game in the series where it didn't at all seem like a collectathon. Supercharger's story was anything but. Whereas there were elements of collectathon in every story up until now.
And I think the animation team here also really just helped sell the story as well.
Right, the animators and the voice actors, they were on point and just made this story shine. This story, honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised if this story had been the script for a Skylanders movie instead of a game. That's how good I would say it is.
And it feels oftentimes when you're watching those cutscenes like you are watching a Skylanders movie.
It really does.
The low point of the game when the Coral Light gets destroyed and Glumshanks sort of sacrifices himself, like, that's great. And it's great to see all those NPCs working together. Like, it's great seeing, Sharkfin and Mags and Callie all trying to, like, save each other as they're trying to not get destroyed by the Sky Eater. It's really well done all throughout. The interactions with Chaos and the darkness is amazing. The decision to personify the darkness as a character is fantastic, and we get to see just so much more interactions with Flynn and Callie and Tessa and get to just see their relationships build more. We get to see Chaos realize, sort of, but also not realize the impact that Glumshanks has on him. Like, it's done really well. And, we even get background for the Spellpunks in this game. Like, we get to find out, some lore about the Spellpunks. So, it's great. It's done really well, and all of it pretty much feels cohesively wrapped into one story, considering that David Rodriguez wrote the story for Swap Force, which is, kind of collectathon feeling, and, is kind of okay. It's in the bottom half of both of our lists. Like, he really stepped up his game for this plot. Like, it's good.
It really is. Now, moving on to the final, as of this recording, installment in the Skylanders series, Skylanders Imaginators. Inklander, why don't you tell me where you have that one placed?
Right, so Imaginators for me is placed in 5th place. It is right above Spyro's Adventure for me. It feels very collectathon-y, like the Doomlander fights. It's like, oh, what a surprise, it's a Doomlander fight. They just feel very samey. And I get that's kind of also a gameplay thing, but it's also a story thing. And then the whole, birthday cake sequence just feels contrived. It just doesn't feel to me like any thought went into that at all. And the really awful decision to use the Skylanders as NPCs as opposed to all the characters that we had throughout, the first 5 games, like taking them out of the spotlight, taking Flynn and Callie and all these other characters out of the spotlight just really, really hurt the story to me. And, it does have some interesting stuff, but even like the new character that primarily gets introduced, Brain, he's not really that exciting to me. I really find his character to be kind of annoying for the most part. Like, he's not awful, but like, yeah, for me, I overall just, yeah, I really kind of don't like this plot. I think it's better than the Spyro's Adventure plot because at least it actually tries to have a story. Like, actually, like, Chaos trying to, like, build better Skylanders is actually a story, and it's moving the plot forward, as opposed to just, oh, go here, get this, go here, get that. So there is a little bit more of a story to it, but it falls flat to me in so many areas that I had to put it in 5th.
Now, as for me, I have placed Skylanders Imaginators in 4th place. And similarly to how I stated that Trap Team and Giants would have been like neck and neck tied, I would say the same about Imaginators and Swap Force. I did place Imaginators just above Swap Force, but not by a lot. I will agree that removing all the characters we've known and loved up until this point from the story, except right at the very beginning, that was a very bad story decision. That really made this storyline suffer. But as Inklander said, there is still a story to it. And a lot of this story is more character building on the side of Chaos than anything else, because we don't really get the story for the Skylanders that are kind of taking the places of the NPCs. But for me, in contrast to what Inklander said, the new character, Brain, honestly, with what he was trying to do, with trying to point Chaos in the direction of, well, maybe you're not really on the right path because you're not looking at how you're going to reach your goals. You're being short-sighted because you're focusing more on how am I going to build the bad guy that's going to beat the Skylanders. And that story dynamic of the Brain trying to point these things out to Chaos and Chaos not even realizing it, not recognizing it, probably intentionally failing to recognize it because he's Chaos, like, that to me made for a bit more enjoyable plot than anything Swap Force gave us. On the one hand, well, all our most beloved characters were kind of locked up in the academy and left there to rot, and we got the Skylanders. As characters, even though they didn't have any story at all, the Skylanders being Skylanders were definitely more memorable than 98% of the characters that Swap Force gave us.
Like, I can agree with that, especially since we're already familiar with, like, Spyro and Stealth Elf and all the characters like that.
Honestly, if it hadn't been for what the Brain was trying to do in this storyline, this would have been a dead tie with Swap Force, or maybe even below it. It's the whole Brain plotline is what caused me to place this above Swap Force, albeit still in the bottom half of the ranking.
I do like the Brain and Chaos dynamic. I just don't think the character's that memorable.
I found a lot of the interactions to be very memorable, especially the cutscene where Brain was like, well, now I'm in your bird. I just really, really enjoyed the dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah, see, and for me, like, most of the stuff that Brain does, I just automatically forget about it. Like right after I see it. Like, I just don't find a lot of it to be that clever, personally. Oh no, the writing for the character doesn't come off as really clever for me, and that's why I just don't like the character personally, and I think that kind of brings down what they're trying to do. I don't think it's awful, but I do think that it does hinder the plot for me.
And that's a fair assessment as well. So now, Inklander, to kind of recap, why don't you go ahead and go down your list and tell us in what order, best to worst, you think these stories are?
Alright, so the best game for me is Skylanders Superchargers. In second place is Skylanders Giants. Third place is Skylanders Trap Team. Fourth place is Skylanders Swap Force. Fifth place is Skylanders Imaginators. And in sixth place, and last, I have Skylanders Spyro's Adventure.
And for my list, in first place, I have Superchargers. In second place, Skylanders Trap Team. Third place is Skylanders Giants. Fourth is Skylanders Imaginators. Fifth goes to Skylanders Swap Force. And sixth goes to Skylanders Spyro's Adventure.
overall, we did end up pretty much having pretty close lists here. Like, really, we just had our second and third place and our fourth and fifth place swapped there, but otherwise, we pretty much, for the most part, agree roughly on about where these should be.
Which is a first for us, honestly,
Yes.
in a ranking list.
Yes, because that was definitely not the case when it came to the games overall.
No.
But yeah, so here we were at least able to agree that Superchargers is the best plot and Spyro's Adventure is the worst.
And that Trap Team and Giants are in the top half, and Imaginators and Swap Force are in the bottom half. We also agreed on that.
Yes, that's true as well. But let us know what your ranking is if you're watching on YouTube in the comments. We would love to hear it, or I guess you could also just add us on Twitter about that as well and tell us your ranking, because we'd love to know how you would rank the Skylanders stories.
Absolutely, do tell us. I love reading these ranking lists. I really, really do. I get a kick out of it every time. And now that we've finished up talking about the Skylanders stories around the campfire, it's time for us to go trick-or-treating for some Skylanders on a legendary treasure hunt.
Ditto and I have just finished our trick-or-treating run for some Skylanders, and we are now about to compare what goodies we got for this holiday episode. So the challenge for the Legendary Treasure Hunt was to find the lot with the most Gimmicklanders of only one type, with the max price of $45. So this is a little bit different than what we've done before. So basically the whole goal of this one was you could find a lot, it could be a really good, really big lot, and it could have tons of characters of the Swap Force and Trap Masters and, Superchargers. It could have a whole variety of it. But the thing is you could only pick one Gimmicklander type. So if you had a lot of, Trap Team and Supercharger characters and you had to pick, is it going to be the Trap Masters or is it going to be the Superchargers that you're going to be counting this week? So that's kind of the idea that we are going for this particular challenge. And so as per usual, we are going to be using 1 point for every Gimmicklander of your choice in the lot, half a point for every $5 under the max price you are, and minus half a point for every Shroom Boom in the lot. And as per usual, since I am hosting for this episode, I'm going to be able to award a bonus point for whichever lot seems to go above and beyond. So Ditto, let's start off with your lot. What did you find for this holiday episode?
Well, Inklander, I actually found a really, really good lot for this episode. I'm quite impressed with what I was able to find. My lot's actually really simple and straightforward. I found it on Mercari, and I decided to go with the Superchargers Gimmicklanders. So I found a lot of 10 characters: Hurricane Jetvac, Dive Clops, Big Bubble Pop Fizz, Nightfall, Spitfire, Bone Bash Roller Brawl, Deep Dive Gilgrunt, Fiesta, Super Shot Stealth Elf, and Smash Hit. Total of 10 Superchargers for a total of $38.
That's actually a really good lot. I mean, you got Nightfall in there, who's pretty forgettable. And, some of the reposes aren't great, but hey, you got Deep Dive Gilgrunt in there. The best version of Gilgrunt out there. Smash Hit's a lot of fun. Spitfire's also a pretty good character. So, you do actually have a lot of pretty good characters in there. I'm not a big fan of Fiesta, but I know you really like Fiesta.
I really do.
It's a pretty good lot. It's a pretty good varied lot here, and you have half of the lineup right at the get-go here, which is great if you're trying to collect for Superchargers, and it's at a really good price too.
Less than $4 a figure it comes out to when you average the price.
So this is actually a really good haul. Absolutely. So your initial score is 10 for the 10 different Superchargers, and you are $7 under the max price of $45. So that brings your score up to 10.5 points.
Well, thank you, Inklander. That's actually a really, really good score.
Yeah, but that's not all, because we haven't gone over my lot yet. But, I mean, it's literally half the roster of Superchargers for a really good price, so I kind of have to give you the bonus point as well. So that's going to be bringing you up to 11.5 points, actually, for this episode.
Ooh, well, thank you.
So my lot comes from eBay for this episode, and I decided to go with the Giants for my Gimmicklanders, and my lot consists of actually just 7 Giants, also pretty straightforward, just like Ditto's. So my lot includes Crusher, Tree Rex, Hothead, Swarm, Bouncer, Eyebrawl, and Granite Crusher, a variant. So it is missing Thumpback and Ninjini, so it's not a complete set of the Giants, but hey, you do have a variant thrown in there in Granite Crusher, and Granite Crusher's awesome. He looks so cool in game. He's a lot of fun to play as. So, I do think that that's a pretty good bonus, and the price of this lot is at $18.
Granite Crusher is even more beautiful than Crusher, and he's a lot of fun to play as. So Granite Crusher is kind of a win there.
Looking at this lot, my initial total is 7 for the 7 giant Skylanders, and I am $27 under the max price of $45, which gives me 2.5 additional points, bringing my total up to 9.5 points this week. So Ditto, it seems you're the winner of this trick-or-treat legendary treasure hunt by 2 points.
Yay, go me. Good game.
Good game. Well, it seems it's time for our Halloween tour on the Dread Yacht, but looking around, it doesn't seem like I can find it. Oh! Nope, I see it. It's actually that Flynn has completely decorated it and turned it into a haunted house to celebrate Halloween. So, you know what? I think we'll go on up and check out what Flynn's doing and see if we're able to convince him to take us to a new location.
As we climb aboard the very over-decorated Dread Yacht, Flynn slips into the cabin, so we decide to follow him. But it seems that he's had the help of a portal master to truly decorate the Dread Yacht for this, because suddenly we find ourselves somewhere completely different. This doesn't seem to be the Dread Yacht at all. The ground before us is paved with bones. There's shoddily built fencing and bridges, and a couple ominous-looking doors. But Flynn's nowhere to be found. It seems we have stumbled into the Undead Sensei realm from Skylanders Imaginators. So, to start off with, I'd like to point out that this level is really interesting and unique in the sense that it doesn't have a mappable path that you can take from start to finish with the collectibles all in the same place every time as every other level in the franchise does. This level is kind of randomly generated, which I have a love-hate relationship with this one because of it, because you could get through really, really quickly, or if you're trying for 100% in the level, it could take you several runs because it is entirely random. So Inklander, let's hear your thoughts on this a little bit.
Right, so this level's concept is actually interesting. Whenever we have RNG come into play when it comes to level design, I actually think that that's kind of interesting. It's a really cool concept. And granted, sometimes there are games or there are some situations where I feel like that hinders it, especially if it's not good RNG, like if the programming isn't sophisticated enough to give you something actually good. But in this case, I actually think that it works out really well. I think there's a decent variety of stuff. You can get a good variety of things. As you say, this could take a number of playthroughs to actually be able to get all the collectibles, depending on, how they spawn into the level if they do. And you also get, the potential for, some enemy fights. You get some potential for lock puzzles, like, you actually have a variety of different things that can happen, and as you say, there's no way to particularly memorize the path, because every time you enter into it, it's going to be set up a little bit differently. And the whole point of this is to be able to get to the arena at the end and try to find your way to it, and even that at the end is going to be a little bit randomized when it comes to what kind of loot you can get at the end of it. So that's also a really cool kind of mechanic, because that could be completely different every time you enter as well. So there's actually kind of a lot going on for this level in terms of replayability. It doesn't particularly feel boring. Granted, if the level gets to the point where it's a little too short, maybe it is, because it's just like, you could end up with just like a straight path and there you go, it's done. So that could be like a negative to this level, but otherwise, sometimes it could actually take you a little bit longer and give you a little bit more branching paths. And in that case, I think it actually makes it a little bit more entertaining.
Now, the whole purpose of this level is to go find Flynn, who is in the arena at the end of the level, wherever that may be. That could be the first door you see. It could be off of one of the many branching corridors. Who knows? That's the beauty of the RNG. But the point is to find Flynn, and this was his second and final appearance in Skylanders Imaginators. So it was really, really cool to be able to see him again, if even for just a couple of minutes, because, well, he's Flynn. And the theming of this level is amazing. The RNG, as we've stated already, is kind of hit or miss. It could be a really good thing, it could be a really bad thing. Depends on what your objective for the level is as well. If you're trying to get all the collectibles, the RNG could make it so you have to play it a number of times. If you're trying to hit the speedrun time, or just get a good speedrun time personally, then you could end up stuck with a longer level and not such a good time. But you could also end up with the ability to gain all the collectibles in a single run, or a really short, really quick speedrun time, depending on how the RNG plays in your favor. And then fighting in the arena while Flynn makes comments is also kind of fun.
Yeah, and I actually really do enjoy what this level is trying to do here. Like, I think there are some games that have pretty bad RNG when it comes to just, randomly created levels, but, like, in this case, I actually think it's pretty good. Even the shorter versions of this level that could appear, I think, are still kind of fun. And it's a really cool concept. I like when games try to step into this, like, randomly generated kind of level design, especially when it's done really well. Like, this level kind of reminds me of one of my favorite Mario Party boards from Mario Party 8, being Boo's Haunted Hideaway, which is another, like, haunted mansion kind of RNG themed kind of thing, where every time you play that board, it has a completely different layout. And I, feel that same kind of way here. Like, every time you enter into this level, you don't know if you're, like, what kind of puzzles you're going to be getting. You don't know what kind of enemy fights you're going to be getting, if you're going to be getting something like that at all, other than, of course, the arena at the end. And it's really cool, it's actually done pretty well, and I like it. I like the theming of it. I like the kind of, like, haunted house kind of feel of it, of everything getting switched up and turned around. I think that's one of the reasons why I think I like the Boo's Haunted Hideaway level from Mario Party 8. But I really think that it works pretty well. It works with the theming, and it's fun, and there's just literally endless replayability to this level, which is definitely not a bad thing.
Now, every Elemental Sensei realm in Imaginators has its little gimmick, but I think the RNG being the gimmick of this Undead Sensei realm kind of makes it the most unique of the Elemental Sensei realms.
Yeah.
And I definitely think it's better off for it.
I would love to see some sort of Skylanders game that takes this idea and takes this mechanic to the next level. Like, I would love to see, like, a maybe 4-player co-op Skylanders game where you're basically having to do dungeon runs, where every time you enter into a new area, you don't know what, like, the elemental alignment's going to be, you don't know, like, what it's going to look like, you don't know, what paths are going to be where, what kind of loot you can get from each place. Like, I think that'd kind of make a really fun Skylanders game on its own, is just being able to enter into all these, like, randomly generated dungeons and trying to progress through them and maybe have like some sort of big boss fight at the end that can be randomized too. I think they could have a lot of fun with the potential for a game kind of like that, and that'd be cool to see them explore that in the future. But here, where it's just isolated to this one level, it's not bad. It's actually pretty cool.
Well, I have no idea where I am, but I found Flynn, and I'm sick of being lost in this place. So I'm going to have him guide us out of this portal back to the Dread Yacht, where we can fly off to the Archean Arena and I can vent some steam because I hate being lost like this. Ah!
With the help of Ditto and myself, we've managed to get rid of the portal that goes to the Undead Sensei realm, and we've also managed to just kind of declutter Flynn's ship a little bit, so we're actually able to figure out what's going on. And due to all that, we've been able to make our way to the Archean Arena, the segment where we pit Skylander against Skylander in hypothetical combat. So, Ditto, which champion have you brought to the arena for this episode?
Well, Inklander, for this Halloween episode of Skylanders Portalcasters, I have chosen to champion for me Legendary Tri-Tip. Legendary Tri-Tip is the legendary variant of Tri-Tip, who is a melee earth element Skylander with a maximum health at level 20 of 1,110, critical hit 91, armor 80, speed 60, and luck 35. His attack 1 is Mace Smash, which smashes the ground, or any opponent in front of him, with his mace dealing 124 points of damage, 382 if charged. His attack 2 is Dino Dash, which charges forward with his horns pointing forward, pushing enemies as he goes for 168 points of damage. And his attack 3 is Summon Fossil Traps, which summons these fossils that trap your opponent, which I think is kind of implied, dealing 96 points of damage on trap and 29 points of residual damage until the opponent manages to break free or is defeated.
This is terrifying so far. I understand why you picked this character for a Halloween episode.
Right? Because it's terrifying. In the way of upgrade paths, the top path is Paleolithic Pounder, which increases the mace's damage, causes the mace to leave a lingering quake zone that causes residual damage, and the third hit of the mace combo creates an explosion for extra damage. And the bottom path is Jurassic Justice, which improves Tri-Tip's armor, spawns the fossil traps more quickly, and allows for Tri-Tip to dash into one of the fossil traps, causing an explosion. Lots of explosions. I would also like to bring to attention his Soul Gem, Never Saw It Coming, which occasionally causes a powerful asteroid to fall from the sky and create a devastating explosion. I've only ever seen it hit enemies in arena battles. There usually has to be a high concentration of enemies, but it does a phenomenal amount of damage if it does hit.
Yeah. Alright, so my character's dead. Absolutely dead. Or I guess you could call him undead, because the character I've brought to the arena this week is Crypt King. Crypt King is, as I said, an undead element, mixed kind of battle style character. With a health of 900, a critical hit of 56, armor of 35, speed of 55, and luck of 24. His primary attack is swinging his Traptanium Broadsword, which deals 41 damage. His attack 2, the Swarm, unleashes a swarm of undead insects that seek out enemies, which deals 20 points of damage. And his third attack is Haunted Sword, where he's able to release the Traptanium Broadsword and steer it around towards enemies to be able to attack that way. And that deals 15 points of damage.
That's cute.
Isn't it? His top path is Lord of the Sword, where attack 1 gains combos, and defeating enemies increases damage and armor. Meanwhile, his bottom path is Swarm Summoner, which has attack 2 stun. Using attack 1 causes the swarm to increase its damage, and the swarm heals when it disappears. So, Crypt King's fun. I don't usually play as him, but going up against Tri-Tip here...
Tri-Tip is terrifying.
Yeah, I don't think Crypt King stands, like, any chance at all.
I would say not. His only advantage would be if you take that bottom path, he gets a little bit of healing if you focus on the swarm. But stats-wise, none of his stats, not a single one, not even health, outshines Tri-Tip. His damage, by comparison, is...
awful.
I was going to say abysmal, but awful works too.
Yeah.
I just, not even factoring into consideration the RNG meteor that may or may not come. That aside, that off the board, just in strategic and physical power alone, I would say Tri-Tip easily wins this. Set up a couple fossil traps and just smash around with the mace and you're good.
Yeah, Crypt King doesn't have anything going on for him. Like, you mentioned the healing, but, like, even the healing is not going to be able to counter 124 points of damage.
No.
Or 168, or, like, it's not
And that's
gonna happen.
before taking the top path, which increases the power of the mace.
Yeah, and then even then, that charge attack that Tri-Tip has, like, yeah, it takes probably, like, 2 or 3 seconds to charge up, but it's not that bad. And if you manage to hit me with that, there goes, like, almost half of my health.
Yes. And then even if you try to run away, my dash attack does over 100 points of damage as well.
Obviously, the solution is for me to use the Haunted Sword and just stay at a distance and attack you, dealing 15 points of damage each time with the sword.
That's the obvious answer. And that causes Crypt King to win this how many times?
Absolutely none. So... so I think this one's actually a pretty easy Archaean Arena for me to call, so in this haunted episode of Skylanders Portalcasters, it seems that legendary Tri-Tip takes this, like, 1,000 times out of 1,000 times.
What a nightmare.
After that really exciting fight, it's time for us to go ahead and board back aboard the Dread Yacht, but as we're starting to step aboard, we start to see some spectators filing in as Brock welcomes them forth from his throne above the arena. And underneath him, a gate begins to raise, and it looks like a villain begins to step out of the shadows. It seems it's time for another segment of Brock's Baddies.
And as this gate rises, the audience lets out an audible gasp as a bark demon lumbers forth directly at us. In this segment of Brock's Baddies, we are going to be discussing the Bark Demons. The Bark Demon is a monster from Skylanders Giants that is designed after a tree. They can heal by eating chompies, and they have the ability to plant their arms in the ground, allowing those to surge forward and attack the Skylanders. So, Inklander, what are your impressions overall of this creature of Skylands?
Right, so the Bark Demons are interesting, and they appear in Skylanders Giants, but they also kind of sort of appear in Spyro's Adventure as well, but they're called Stump Demons, and they have a slightly different appearance, but they're basically the same enemy, they just are called something different, so we're going to be kind of talking about both here, from Darklight Crypt, and also from their appearances in Giants.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, here's the thing. I think they're a really cool enemy design, and I think their attacks are pretty interesting. But I really don't like them just because of the, like, massive amount of pain they are.
They really are. And especially if you're in a higher difficulty, the balancing makes them that much harder.
They will deal like half of your health to you in an instant, and it's not fun. Like, yeah, if you're playing on Nightmare, you really need to be careful around these enemies. But even not in Nightmare, like they can like burrow under the ground and attack you with tree branch stuff, or they can just like smack you if you're close to them. They have close and long range attacks, which makes them definitely a very menacing foe.
It really does. And on top of that, a fun fact about these is they can actually damage other enemies with these attacks as well.
That is true. So in that case, you could kind of use some of their attacks to your advantage.
If you can calculate it out properly, yeah. The Bark Demon is probably one of the most terrifying enemies in the early Skylanders games.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest. Anytime I see a Bark Demon, I really just don't want to be there dealing with it, because dealing with these is a pain.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
They have a lot of health, they can deal a lot of damage really quickly. They are a mixed attack style enemy, which is really, really dangerous and imposing. These creatures are the stuff of nightmares, which makes them really fitting for this episode. And I can't think of a single person who is ever really happy to see one.
Oh yeah. Like, that's the thing, is like they are really annoying. I do really like how they kind of play with the dark light crypt mechanic, though, in Spyro's Adventure, like how they turn into trees in the real world, but then in the ghost world they are the bark demons. I think that's a really kind of cool mechanic to them. It's definitely fun, and it's a really cool idea for an enemy, and I like the design, and I like the ideas behind their attacks, but the thing is I'm very torn on that, because while I think they're a great idea for an enemy, I really don't like fighting them.
I really enjoy their design as well. I enjoy that they give some sort of a challenge rating to any level that they appear in, but on the same lines as Inklander, I really, really don't like dealing with them, so at the same time, I don't like seeing them.
Yeah, so hey, good thing that they stopped appearing with giants. Good thing we won't see them again after that.
Right. So, Inklander, using our standard rating of 1 to 7, where would you place the Bark Demon?
If I'm trying to be objective, which I'm not gonna be, but...
There's no point in being objective.
Yeah, if I was trying to be objective, on paper, I would say that this is a great enemy. And I'd probably give them a really high ranking. But the thing is I'm going to be subjective here, and I like their design, and I like the idea behind them, which makes them fare a little bit better for me. But also the thing is like it's trudgery to get through fighting these creatures sometimes. So I'm gonna have to give it a 3, I think. I like their design, and I think that's cool, but the thing is I just don't like fighting them that much. And so they're going to be a little bit on the negative side to me. Like, these enemies are really quite annoying to contend with. So yeah, know what? I'm changing my answer. I don't think it's a 3. I think it's a 2. I really don't like the Bark Demon. I like their design. I really do, but I can't stand fighting them.
I did not see that coming, but at the same time, I kind of did. So the Bark Demon, I too really like its design. I think that the creative team at Toys for Bob did a really, really good job designing it and making an actually imposing threat of an enemy. And I appreciate that it adds the challenge rating that it does, but only to a certain extent, because the way the game is balanced, that the Bark Demons can not only end your run by slowing you down, but they can end your whole Skylander. And that is absolutely terrifying. So, on a personal level, because I absolutely hate seeing these crop up anywhere I actually have to fight them, on a personal level, I'm going to get a little bit petty here, and I'm going to give it a 3, because I just don't like dealing with them. With that, Inklander has scored this enemy a 2. I have scored it a 3 out of 7. So the overall Brock's Baddies rating for the Bark Demon is an astounding 2.5.
So this is the first time that we've had an enemy end up in the negative rating. But I mean, I honestly don't think it's that surprising. They are troublesome.
That concludes this episode of Skylanders Portalcasters. You'll find the website and links to the host's individual channels in the description. Follow the Skylanders Portalcasters Twitter for regular updates about this podcast. And join Discord server for Skylanders discussion. Until next time, this is Chill Bill with K-Troll signing off.
Bye.